but 100 years is a short time.
Yeah.
In the States, 100 miles is what I drive to work, and 100 years is forever ago.
Yeah.
So.
Fantastic. Well, guys, it's a pleasure to talk to you. We're going to actually see more of the team later on. We're going to have a garage tour with the Operation Motorsport team and get the stories of more of the fantastic team behind the scenes here. But, Scott, I hear cars out on track. I think it's time, guys, to get part 2 of the Race of Remembrance 2024 underway here at Anglesey. Brilliantly cameraed and produced by the team here at Alpha Live and stewarded well by the fantastic team here with the BRSCC. I think it's time to hand up to the legend in the commentary box, and that is Mr. Paul Trustwell. So, Paul, we've got some good racing to get underway, and more importantly, we've got to carry on the stories that formed from last night.
It's very much carrying on as you were before, that's right. Thanks very much, Scott, Rob Lewis.
Gents, that was excellent. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Rob Lewis as well down there in the pit lane. On the track, meanwhile, the cars are lining up, but they're not doing so in a grid formation, they're doing it in a nose-to-tail formation. And that's because what we're going to do at 9 o'clock in about 4 minutes' time is to restart the race behind the safety car, and it will be a safety car restart. So it will be as if nothing happened overnight. All the cars will merely set off in the order as they were behind the safety car at the beginning of this part of the race. So cars being lined up. As I say, this is not the race order, this is merely the order in which they came through at the end of last night's racing, which ran through until 10 o'clock at night. We had a safety car situation to bring the field under control, and we're going to get another safety car situation now. What you need to imagine is this is not a grid in the sense of 2x2, although they are lining up 2x2 now. This is more like the queue for the ferry. Remember when you go on the ferry, they line all the cars up, or on the Channel Tunnel or whatever you use for such things. All the cars on the left will go away first, and then all the cars on the right will be flagged off as soon as all the cars on the left have gone through. And then, as I say, we'll have one lap behind the safety car, and then we'll be back underway until 10:30, which point we'll suspend the race once again. Everybody will park on the start-finish line, and as many people as possible, we hope, will then make their way down into the pit lane for the Remembrance service, the main event of the Race of Remembrance being the Remembrance service. Whoever you are about the circuit, whether you're marshalling, spectating, then please make your way down into the pit lane for that Remembrance service. A very moving service it will be. Once we've got that out of the way, then we'll get the call to let's go racing, and all the drivers will then get back in their cars and we'll set off once again. So the only rule that has been in place overnight is whoever was in the car when the race was suspended last night has to be in the car at this stage. So there's been a lot of work done to the cars overnight. Obviously they'll have refueled them. In nearly all cases they'll have put new tyres on, and there may well have been various other rebuilding work done overnight. So in some cases we have virtually a new car. However, we do not have the Rob Boston Racing Lotus Elise, car number 119, beg your pardon, which was in with a shout at the top of the field in the early stages of yesterday's race, but then sadly caught fire due to a punctured fuel pipe, which they think was punctured by a bit of debris getting into a radiator duct and then being kicked up and puncturing that fuel line, and that set fire to the car. At one point last night it was seen that Rob Boston was prepared to work on the car and get it out, but apparently not. So we haven't got Rob Boston Racing Lotus Elise, but I think the rest of the 54 cars are out there and are setting off now behind the safety car, with the current race leader Alex Smith at the wheel of the number 7 RAF Motorsport Audi TT, leading the way. This car, a bit of a surprise. It's a exercise by the RAF Motorsports Association to demonstrate what can be done with sustainable fuels. It runs on sustainable biodiesel. Quite a story behind this car, because it's been brought to the track in a truck that runs on sustainable biodiesel. The car itself runs on exactly the same fuel as the truck runs on, and it's managed to get 4 of its 6 pit stops out of the way. We'll talk about pit stops later on as the race develops, but the rules state that each car has to make at minimum 6 mandatory pit stops, each of which have to be of 4 minutes in duration. During those pit stops, they can refuel, they can do driver changes, but if they do any pit stop which involves a refuel or a driver change, then the car must stay in the pits for 4 minutes. If they just come in to do anything else to the car, possibly change a punctured tyre or something like that, then it doesn't have to be a 4-minute stop, but it then doesn't count towards your allocation of 6 mandatory stops. Now, all of the leading Class D cars have performed 4 of their 6 stops already. The race, as I say, being led by the Audi TT, number 7, in second place, but quite a long way down the queue. Actually, car number 20 in the queue is number 97. This is Steve McCulley in the Leos Racing Caterham, or Leos Racing Caterham. They are actually 2 laps behind the Audi. They've also done 4 mandatory pit stops, but unfortunately for them, the timing of their pit stops wasn't quite as agreeable as the Audi was able to do their pit stops. The Audi's pit stops having taken place under safety car conditions, whereas Steve McCulley and his Caterham teammate Don Henshaw, both of them having to do pit stops under green conditions as well, and that's why they've ended part 1 of the race 2 laps behind. In third place in the race is Jason McAnulty, sharing with David McAnulty in the Lotus Elise 117, what you might call the other Lotus Elise, the purple car. Hello, Peter Shearer. Peter Shearer up here, reporting, I assume, for Autosport and Motorsport News. Yes, so the entire Motorsport media present up here in the commentary box with us. Safety car then lights are off. It's been pulled into the pit lane. This is the marvellous Bentley Bentayga, which we've got as the safety car this weekend. So Alex Smith then leading them round. As I say, Steve McCulley is back in the 19 slot on the grid, so he will not be challenging, but he is a little bit behind in terms of the race, because he does have this 2-lap disadvantage. In third place, Jason McAnulty, as I say, with the purple Lotus Elise just coming through now as the lights indicate the race underway once again. And then in fourth place at the moment, as the cars make their restart, is the number 27 BMW, which is one of the fastest cars on the circuit when it's in the hands of Paul Cook. Last night it was very impressive indeed with Paul Cook behind the wheel. In this section of the race, it's being started by Wayne Lewis, who is the second quickest of the 3 drivers, it's fair to say, with the third driver of that team, Chris Slater, will be taking over the car, we expect, just before the Remembrance service, but we'll see how that pans out. We've got an hour and a half of racing to get through before we get to that stage. And if you're following along on the live stream or on the TSL Timing website, the TSL Timing website will be showing the aggregate positions, which is the sum of the positions as they were at the end of part 1, with times added together as well. So what you see on the timing screen won't necessarily agree exactly with what we see on the track because of the aggregate nature of the race. But Alex Smith then, with this 2-lap lead on the number 97 Caterham 7 of Steve McCulley, and then Jason McAnulty with the number 117 Lotus Elise in third place. And those two cars, along with the 27 RAF BMW with Wayne Lewis driving, have moved themselves to the head of the field at the moment. And the other story from last night was a miscalculation by the McAnulty team, the purple Lotus Elise and the 117, who miscalculated their driving time by 34 seconds and ended up with Jason McAnulty driving for 34 seconds longer than he should have done. And that resulted in a one-lap penalty for that car. And as a result of that, the results that were published last night showed that one-lap penalty for the 117. So they've got to overcome that disadvantage. Once they have overcome that disadvantage, or at the moment as a result of that disadvantage, they are one lap behind the Steve McCulley Caterham, and therefore 3 laps behind the race-leading Audi TT. As Scott and Rob were saying, down on the grid, or down in the pit lane, there has been some overnight drizzle. The drizzle has now stopped, but it's still very damp and moist in the air, and that will lead to a somewhat greasy track. So in these early stages it's going to be a bit slippery, and as I say that, almost on cue, the BMW 116 trophy car, number 116, goes for a spin across the grass, manages to get going again, but as I say, that was a bit of a grassy moment. Coming out of church, one of the features, though, of the weather here in Anglesey is that the last few weeks, morning James Cameron, who's up here watching events to nice and early, it's been so dry up here at Anglesey for the past few weeks, is that unlike previous years, the grass around the circuit isn't quite so boggy as it has been. There were times in years gone by when a spin across the grass like that would have ended up with the car getting bogged down, but it's not that damp and horrible this weekend, although, as I say, there are some showers forecast for the remainder of the day. But James Cameron has friends in high places, and normally the Remembrance service manages to take place without any need for umbrellas. So the race settling into a pattern. As I say, most of the leading group, Class D cars, the cars with the most powerful power-to-weight ratio, they have all completed 4 pit stops. Different situation in the smaller classes, Class C and B, but we will come to that in a minute. In the meantime, we can go down to Rob Lewis, who's down in the pits. And so what can you tell us, Rob?
As you can see down in the pit lane, car number 14 is serving a drive-through stop-go penalty already. Sorry, a stop-go penalty as opposed to a drive-through. This is left over from last night. The team were adjudged to have caused a collision. So the team are now serving their time penalty, and away they go for the rest of the race. The team frantically telling them to tag out on the Hue tag system that they have here. We'll explain a bit more about that, how that works later on. Other stories from up and down the pit lane. The Rob Boston Racing team were looking to get their Lotus Elise back on track after the fire that was occurring yesterday. The Audi TT may have been leading proceedings, but the team were up until 4:30 last night trying to fix small niggling issues that they had with the car that they nursed towards the finish line. And Scuderia Polo Rosso. We spoke to them once the broadcaster finished last night, and they finished the race with a puncture. No other damage, miraculously enough. James Matthews took that car around for the last 15 minutes of the race, 10 seconds a lap off the pace, and thought it's better to shed 30 seconds off of his race time than get into the pit lane, change a wheel, and cost the team more time. There's more stories up and down the pit lane to come. None other than the Jaguar that was also involved in a bit of an altercation with another car yesterday. They broke broke a track rod end on that car, and none other than the BRSCC came to the rescue with their Jaguar XF Sport Brake safety car. They've borrowed parts from the safety car. It's currently parked with no track rod in it at the end of the pit lane, so the team can carry on using that Jaguar in this race. So they've got straight front wheels, but as for the safety car, well, they might need the bits back later on so Scott can get home. I'm going to find out some more stories up and down the pit lane, but for now it's time to head back up into the commentary box to Scott and Paul.
Yeah, just to add a bit of background to that, Scott Woodward, who's joined me up here in the commentary box, was given the keys to the Jaguar safety car, drove it up here from Kent on Thursday. You were intending to take it back tonight, Scott?
Yes, that was the original plan. Yes, morning everybody, but didn't see us on the beginning of it. Yeah, it's a car which is regularly ferried around in my hands from circuit to circuit, depending on what's required. And yes, it was a slight surprise, but it was needing the track rod was being needed for to replace the Jaguar, but. It's the spirit of the event, so it's RRR 2024, so you do what you can to help, and all good. So there's plenty of other colleagues that I could get, and did get a lift to and from the hotel from, so it's all good on that sense.
Yeah, the car is out there and circulating in the hands of Lewis Ward, then the AFCN Motorsport entered car, and it's positioned fairly well down the field as a result of missing best part of half an hour of the race yesterday, and so we'll see how much it's going to be able to recover over the course of today's racing, ending up after part one in 49th place overall, but a magnificent car, physically as a car, but also splendidly resplendent in its pop bang colour paint job, which is a literal paint job. It's not a wrap. It is a paint job, and you get up close to the car, you can actually feel where the paint has been applied, and with various people's names inscribed on the car as well. So that's the Jaguar, which is participating in this part of the race. The Rob Boston Lotus Elise, as Rob Lewis was just telling us, sadly not participating in this part of the race, and therefore is, I think, the race's only retirement thus far. Another board being shown down on the pit lane for another stop and go penalty for a car number 14 there, which is just done. So having done one stop and go penalty, they've now got another stop and go penalty for the number 14 Mazda. Wonder if they did speeding in the pit lane or something. It's sometimes what happens is drivers get distracted. The thing we haven't done yet, is to talk about the battle in Class C,
yes.
Which is the battle between the two Mazdas, which are just crossing the start-finish line at the moment. Will Blackwell Chambers at the wheel of the number 69 Clapham North MOT Mazda that he's sharing with George Grant, along with a stint from Rob Boston himself last night, although I don't think Rob's scheduled to drive the car today. But that car is leading in Class C, and in second place in Class C is the number 91 Stuart Humphrey Racing Mazda MX-5 Mark III, the green and white car with the EBC brakes on the side, and that car is in second place in the class, but has an advantage because it has done 4 pit stops, whereas the Clapham North MOT car has only thus far done 3. Down in the pits, Rob's got more news for us, so down to you, Rob. Lewis in the pits.
Once again, guys, just a quick update. We spoke about car 14 coming in for its timed stop-go penalty, and the team screamed at the driver, as you heard on the broadcast, "Hugh, tag out, Hugh, tag out." So guess what the driver forgot to do? They didn't Hugh tag out, they've had to come in, another stop-go penalty for them. Such a shame already. Car 14 pulled back with 2 time penalties. And with this Hugh tag system, it's so key that you get it right. The way it works, all of the racers have a little armband on there with a red block. That tells you what driver is going in the car. Now I'm going to direct my camera up to the end of the pit lane. We've got a set of traffic lights on the right hand side where the C see one board is, and it tells you to tag out. The driver goes up to that board, holds his arm out, and the light goes green. That means it's received, and the timekeepers then know what driver is in that car at any one time. That means they can take care of how long they've been in the car, how long the stints were, and make sure everything is tickety-boo in terms of the drivers, the stints, everything's nice and legal for the driver times. But car 14 forgot to do it, committed the cardinal sin, and I'll pan the camera round to car number 119, and the pit lane goes in raptures. The Rob Boston Lotus has now rejoined this race after the fire last night. Back up to you, Paul and Scott.
Yeah, that's big news indeed, because having not seen it on the grid, I was hardly expecting to see it in the race. So prompted by my no doubt saying that it was the race's first and therefore only retirement.
You manifested it. It's here, back on track now.
Just to spite me. Just to prove me wrong yet again. Rob Boston's good at doing that. So the point about the Class C battle, in which Rob Boston and his team are also involved, is that the Will Blackwell Chambers car has the advantage on the track, but owes us a 4-minute pit stop, that car having done only 3 of its mandatory 6, whereas the Stuart Humphrey racing car has already done 4 of its mandatory 6 stops. So it's going to have to do an extra pit stop, the Clapham North car, and that will cost it 4 minutes in the pit lane. Provided the circuit is green, it will cost it 4 minutes if the safety car comes out as well. But if everyone else is going more slowly, then your 4 minutes is less expensive. So that will be what George Grant and his team will be hoping to do with their Clapham North MOT car. A bit of a needle match between 69 and 91, and we will be following that. They've done very well overall, the pair of them, moving up to 6th and 7th places in the overall standings. And as far as Class B is concerned, they are not far behind either, because in 8th place is the leading Class B car, and that's Lowell Forsyth with the Track Scotland 2 Mini Cooper. But we have the similar situation in Class C with pit stops, in that nearly all of the Class B runners up at the top have done 3 pit stops. And that is 155 Track Scotland, who have done 3 pit stops. Then in second in Class B, we've got the Auto Test Mazda of Seb Fisher, car number 24. That car has done 3 pit stops. Then the number 14 Lancaster Insurance car, which Brian Chandler was in 3rd place from, but having done 2 pit stops already, served 2 penalty pit stop and goes, that's put him at some disadvantage. Straight back into the pits has come the Rob Boston Racing Lotus Elise. Scott will tell us what they're doing to it.
Looks like I thought it was possibly just an installation, just a recovery check to make sure it's all good. You notice that they've used quite a lot of blue, quite nicely colour coordinated tape actually on the right hand side, where they had the issue where they had a stone or piece of debris go through and it cut some kind of an oil line or a coolant line, which then unfortunately set the car to catch a light last night. So I imagine that was possibly at the very least just a quick kind of 1-lap installation shakedown to make sure that all the important bits are still working. Give it a quick check over and then quick wipe of the mirrors, and away it'll go hopefully. Rob's looking fairly confident, doesn't look worried about the car at all now that it's up and running again. You just give it a quick once over and I think it should be hopefully good to go, which it is. There it goes.
Yes, it's Peter Mansfield driving the car at the moment, and Peter Mansfield, who's the regular driver of that car. This is not one of its 6 pit stops. Obviously, they didn't change the driver, didn't put any fuel in it. So that car, having spent, 2.5, 3 hours of yesterday's race stuck in the garage, is going to be still have to do its 6 pit stops. We've got a safety car coming out again. Yellow flags waved across the start-finish line, and already then a safety car, and therefore an opportunity for cars to come into the pits even at this early stage. They won't need much fuel, having only been running for 20 minutes, but it could be a cheap pit stop if they do want to top up with fuel. And take advantage of the fact that the safety car is out.
And there's the cause of it. It's the 27 BMW M3. That's our front row sitter from yesterday afternoon. And that car's pulled to a stop. Not quite sure exactly where, but it's pulled up to the barriers, and that's mechanical by the look of it. So unfortunately, the M3,
that's the fourth place car,
which had Wayne Lewis at the wheel of it, I'm afraid, has decided to grind to a halt, which is not the way they wanted to start their Sunday morning.
No, absolutely. And so Wayne Lewis, fourth place at the moment. That car led the early stages of the race in the hands of Paul Cook. Paul, having been incredibly quick in the early stages of yesterday's race, having pulled out a margin of very nearly a minute in the first hour or so of the race. Then the safety car came out. That squashed everybody up again, down to about 15 seconds. He pulled out another minute very nearly, and then the driver changes starting to take place, and the car very slow in the pits. I say very slow in the pits, they were doing 7.5 minutes to do fueling and a driver change on that BMW. They then got it down to 6 minutes for their second pit stop, and then their third pit stop was down more around the 4.5 minute mark, which is where it should be. But as a result of those longer pit stops, the BMW dropped to fourth place in the overall standings at the end of yesterday's 7-hour portion. Is fourth now, or at least it was fourth when the safety car came out, but having parked up against the barrier for the last 2 laps, it's already dropped to sixth place behind the Clapham North MOT Mazda of Will Blackwell Chambers. A couple of the Citroens coming in for their pit stops to pick up a little bit of extra fuel, and I would expect some of the Class B cars to take this opportunity to come in as well. In comes number 19, the Mazda MX-5 of the RAF Infrastar supported team, and that's the Fraser Gillen Lloyd Hudkins driven car. That's not one of the leading runners in Class B. Recovery still going on with the BMW. I don't think we established quite where it's come to rest, did we, Scott?
I think, looking at our producer's cameras, I think it's up at the top of the hill, right down near the hairpin, by the looks of it. It's right near the barrier. Either that
okay.
or... I think we can find out some more information on what's going on down in pit lane. We just head down to our intrepid roving reporter, Rob Lewis, who will give us more details on what he has next.
A bit of drama in the RAF pits at the moment. I've managed to grab Chris Slater for a quick chat. You've got drivetrain issues on one of the cars that's pulled off, I understand.
Yeah, we had a really good day, apart from pit stops with M3 yesterday, but he was just complaining that the clutch pedal didn't feel right as we went out this morning, and we're just waiting for him to be picked up by the guys that do an amazing job. So we don't know the exact problem, but we're just planning for a clutch and release bearing, slave cylinder change, and hopefully we can just play the raffle and pull a good ticket.
Speaking to a couple of the engineers involved, they actually think that with a clutch issue you can normally drive through it, so they're suspecting possibly a prop shaft or a drive shaft issue as well. Yeah,
I mean, if it's a gearbox, that's good because it's quicker than changing a clutch. We've got a gearbox, we've got a prop, but it's on a spare car that we've got in the garage. But yeah, worst case scenario will be clutch and clutch or slave cylinder.
You've also got another car that's currently, well, it could potentially be on the naughty step. The team manager's been called to race control. Is there anything you're aware of?
Only that I think it was car 18. So, yeah, I heard it at the same time as you did, Rob.
No, nothing over the radio to suspect?
My ears aren't tuned in.
No problem, Chris. I'll let you crack on with the rest of the day, but we will catch on later on. Chris will be one of the gentlemen getting ready for the Remembrance service later on. You'll find a lot of the veterans and current serving soldiers will get dressed in their uniform for the Remembrance service coming up a bit later on. More pit lane action going on as we bring you down the pit lane. We've got the GT86 car number 86 into the pits for a pit stop, and quite quickly they've got used to the conditions, and by the looks of it, they're already swapping their wet tyres, these rain sport tyres. They're swapping them for the Yokohama tyres that are softer. They're a semi-slick tyre, they've got a bit more bite. I think they're trying to compromise on the fact that they could potentially get more car speed out of it if they're able to use these semi-slick tyres. The conditions aren't too bad out there. We've got quite a nice crosswind over the circuit, so any spray that gets kicked up, if at all, is going to be blown away quite quickly, and the track is going to dry. The rain at the moment is backing off. We are due a deluge at around 11 o'clock, but conditions looking a bit better this morning. But now, back up to the box.
That's very optimistic of Rob Lewis. Somebody just whispered in my ear reports from one of the cameramen that the drizzle getting heavier. So such is the vagaries of the North Wales coastline. But yeah, maybe putting the semi-slick on is a bit ambitious for the Mission Motorsport team. All the tyres run on, all the cars run on treaded tyres. They are supposed to be road legal tyres, so there's not really the question of dry slicks or anything like that. But what we do occasionally see is what you might call winter tyres versus summer tyres as the 27 BMW gets towed in. It was, as Scott rightly identified, parked right at the end of the Tom Price straight just before the hairpin. That's where he had pulled off. Great work from the marshals already this morning, getting their exercise, having to push the car off the grass and to a position where the tow truck could pick it up, which it has done, towed it back and cleared the circuit, so the safety car lights are out. We are able to resume once again, and we will get racing underway after it was in the end only just 2 laps behind the safety car, with the number 7 RAF Audi of Alex Smith coming through to take the green flag and get full speed racing back underway again. Not very far behind him is Jason McAnulty, not very far behind him on the road. Jason is 3 laps behind in reality and is in 3rd place on the track, because Steve McCulley's Lotus Caterham 7, which goes through, is actually there in 2nd place and trying to make up as much ground as he can. Lap times from the Alex Smith Audi pretty rapid there before the safety car came in. The Alex Smith was just looking down there, lapping in the 150s or thereabouts, and that was his average lap time for the first 10 laps before the safety car came out, and the best lap that the car having recorded thus far, a 1:38 during yesterday's race. So the Wayne Lewis car then, 4th place was there. Listening to Chris Slater, whatever the job is, Scott, it sounds like it's going to be a long job, at least half an hour, he said, which was kind of their best case scenario. If it is just the gearbox, he said that was the best thing they were looking at.
Well, typically some of the gearbox changes that we've seen throughout this race so far have been about roughly half an hour or so to change them, and that's going fast as a team. Usually a gearbox change takes a bit longer. Well, that was close. Just looking on the stream there, one of the tracks, Scotland Minis, almost got into the back of the AFCN Jaguar XF, but of course is now sporting its borrowed track rod now on the front.
You feel
of its
very
car.
Attached to that track rod, don't you, Scott?
I do, but in any case, it's a good thing, because now we can say that, you know, a part of the safety cars now have been on a race car, so that's the cool thing.
Yeah, it certainly is.
James Cameron, whoa, big slide. That's one of the WRC Developments cars getting sideways. James Cameron comes in behind us. It says on the wing now, sorry, BRSTC. But no, in any case, it's we're happy to help in any cases to make that car run as it should do. And it's good to see it back up to full strength, sitting down towards the Tom Price hairpin. Track's got the Mini that's following it through into the hairpin, and also it's got one of the Anthony Seddon BMWs in the BMW class, which is still up there holding an Anthony Seddon Racing 1-2. It's still the rather rapid Mackenzie Priestwood back at the wheel of that car. There's the 44 Flying Haggis Racing Honda Civic. Some of the best sense of humour in the paddock, so they'll be carrying on. And also good to see running at full strength, it seems, is the green Fiesta that's had problems pretty much riddled from the start of the race. The NJM Fiesta, or Kermit as it's known. It's now making its way out of church and following 2 of the BMWs. one of the Matabubu Racing, who are regulars to this race quite often. Oh, and that's not a BMW that should be looking how it should. That's the 305. That's the Royal Engineers car, which got hit from behind last night by the RAF graduates car. Now it's had an impact on the front. It looks as though possibly it's done it well. It's had front and rear impact. I suspect possibly it's lost the back end and maybe had a spin into the barriers, but now it's parked its way far off the road, so that shouldn't require a safety car or even a yellow flag, because it's parked itself way off the road. But that's not exactly the continuation to their race, remember, as they were looking for, because that's that front end of that car is not showroom spec, let's put it that way. So that's unfortunate. So the 305 car, which had been running in 30th position and had Ben Gundry at the wheel, so unfortunately that car has come off the road and had an issue. And oh, there is actually James came out, but there's actually a message on the front wing of the number 10 car that literally says "Thank you, BRSCC." That's quite sweet of them, so that's quite good.
They've also
happy to help.
They've also put a little label on your steering wheel, Scott, so that if you do get into the car, you've got a little label saying "Do not drive." So be warned until that car returns it. Jason McAnulty is chasing down the leader. That's something exciting we can look out for on the track at the moment. Heading up towards Rocket, the race leader, Alex Smith, with the Audi TT, has Jason McAnulty in the third placed Lotus Elise, trying to unlap himself. He's currently 3 laps behind the race leader, and he's trying to unlap himself, as I say, to get himself back to just 2 laps behind, and therefore help to close the gap. They're coming out of Peel, down into the corkscrew and out onto the Tom Price straight, and I have to say Jason McAnulty going very rapidly at the moment, and in his chase of the race leader. One of the features of the race of Remembrance is that because it is an aggregate race, battles on the track aren't necessarily reflected on the timing screen, but from Jason McAnulty's point of view, it's a very important step to make to be able to pass the race leader and take one of those laps that he is off the race lead back. And there he goes. In fact, as they cross the start-finish line, Jason McAnulty just dives up on the inside of the left-hander at target and goes through into now being only 2 laps behind our race leader. Still that BMW stuck out there on the circuit. It's sufficiently out of the way that we're not going to need a safety car to retrieve it, which is kind of good news, bad news situation. Meanwhile, along the back straight, heading up towards Rocket once again, rocketing away, Jason McAnulty then in the Lotus Elise. In terms of where he is now in the lead of this segment of the race, so Jason McAnulty must be ruining the pit stops yesterday, which cost that car a little bit of extra time. Peter Mansfield in the 119 Lotus Elise, lapping, no, not as quickly that time. Yeah, the conditions are a little bit worse. Generally, lap times at the moment dropping away a little bit. McAnulty lapping in 145s. Peter Mansfield's last lap was a 153, so not as quick as they were going earlier on in the race. Just
Conversing to James Cameron for a second, it's history repeating itself with the number 10 Jaguar, because he was showing me, I think he's showing you the same pictures as well, of way back in 2012 when they ran an RJN prepared Nissan 370Z at the Silverstone 24 Hours. Car was running absolutely fine, and then in the night they came across a sideways Marcos in front of them, I think under the safety car, and that caused them to have some damage on the front left, which meant they had to get back to the pits and try and repair it. And again, we say history repeating itself because they had to source a replacement left front wing on that car, and so the only one they could find was the front wing from Bob Neville's own personal silver 370Z. So they fitted it and actually put a message on the front wing that said, "Sorry Bob, X." And then that car finished the race with the same front wing. So it's quite fitting history repeats itself 12 years later, which is quite fitting. But no, I think we can be proud as BRSC to say that our little bit of track rod, our safety car, has been on a race car, so that's quite cool.
There you go. I think I can see you're going to label it up when you when you finally come to sell it as being with certain provenance.
Yes.
But such is the advantage of these types of endurance races based on production cars. I remember years ago when I used to commentate on the Wilhire 24-hour race at Snetterton, which was for quite serious production car racing, and there would always be at least one and sometimes two spare road cars parked behind the garages, ready as donor vehicles should any particular part be required. And of course, to say that is the beauty of racing with production style cars, is you don't have to source special parts because production cars are production cars, and so you just have to make sure that you don't come to the circuit in a particular type of car which ends up being required for parts later on.
It's quite a coincidence then, quite a genuine coincidence that the car they put together was a Jaguar XF. And there was a small, I'll admit, there was a small short thought that shot through my mind, just a very casual thought, thinking, we'll probably end up needing to take a part from it or something to kind of help that car, and lo and behold it did, so it's there. It just made its way through a big gag of the cars. Back on board with one of our onboard cameras. This is the Operation Motorsport's Canada car, 220, which is currently sat at the moment, if I scroll down the order, in 23rd position, so it's not too bad. Its teammate, the 22 car, is sat at the moment in 30th place. That's after it had its lengthy 25-minute front brake change, after it was sparking a lot and overheating, and it caused Mike Stillwagon to, not at speed, but up at the top of the rocket complex to run a little bit too deep. And as a result of that, they had to bring it in, do an entire front disc and pad and caliper change, and then get it back out again. But speaking to the guys this morning, cars are firing on all cylinders. They're all good this morning and just cracking on for the rest of the race. And the Team USA car just making its way now out of the final corner on to start another lap, and it's just chasing down, or in the tow of, the number 91 Stuart Humphrey racing car. Now there's a telltale sign for the weather, because you can see on the camera lens there are spots of rain, so there is some rain at least down on the international loop. And
yes, if you were watching the Jaguar closely as well, you can see that they've got their windscreen wipers set on the intermittent setting, and I'm not quite sure what your Jaguar does, Scott, but mine has an auto setting where you can set it up so that it automatically detects the water on the screen, and I'm guessing that's what they've set with the XF. So again, indications that conditions are getting a little bit worse, in addition to what I was just saying about lap times getting a little bit worse, although Jason McAnulty has just put in the fastest lap of this section of the race. He did a 1:42.588 on his last lap around, which is not as quick as the fastest lap from yesterday's segment was. That was down in the 1:36s for Paul Cook's BMW, but a 1:42 there, an indication that conditions are not getting significantly worse, shall I put it that way. As far as the Class C battle is concerned, Will Blackwell-Chambers is still leading Class C in 5th place overall, 2 laps ahead of the Stuart Humphrey Racing Mazda, but still 3 pit stops to come from the Clapham North MOT car, whereas the Stuart Humphrey car only has 2 more pit stops to perform.
Oh! Of all the cars you don't want to see sideways, it's the Jaguar getting sideways out of the left hand at the corkscrew. I'm glad he caught that, let's put it that way. I should also stress as well, it's not my personal Jaguar, it's the BRCC's Jaguar. I'm just the driver of it to and from circuit. So, but I appreciate it being labelled my Jaguar in terms of it's mine only temporarily in terms of when I'm driving it. But it's purely BRCC's and supplied. I'll give a shout out to RunYourFleet.com. It's been our club safety car since 2021. So it's in our 4th year of partnership. So thank you to Run Your Fleet for supplying that. And it's been a hardy car travelling up and down the racetrack length and breadth of the UK.
My rule is to always say, in whose pocket is the key?
Well, it's not usually my pocket, it's around my neck on a lanyard, so
right.
When I'm driving.
Yes,
okay. But this way, I'm glad that whoever's at the wheel of that Jaguar caught that side, because I was a bit nervous for a second when that happened.
I'll tell you what, in some ways what you want is an early mechanical problem for that car so that it gets parked in the garage and is then safe for the rest of the race, Scott, but let's not hope that. Certainly the 2 cars, the Operation Motorsport Canada car, having a nice little dice with the Jaguar. a couple of cars that you don't often see racing against one another, Toyota and the Toyota GT86 and the Jaguar XF, about to be lapped by the the Audi TT of the RAF team, the black and red car. You're just coming up behind them as they go up towards Rocket at the moment. There goes the race leader, that's Alexander Smith, flashing his lights at the Jaguar and at the Toyota GT86 as he turns through there. So Alexander Smith is able to continue on his merry way. The pair of them have already been lapped by Jason McAnulty's Lotus Elise, which, as we were saying a moment ago, set the best lap of this segment of the race, and is continuing to reduce the gap, therefore, between himself and the race-leading Audi. This Audi, I said at the beginning, is running on this sustainable biodiesel, has very, very good fuel consumption, and could probably get through the race quite happily on 5, if not 4, mandatory pit stops, but regulations state that it has to do 6. So the big problem for that car has been the way it's had a tendency to eat up its front tyres, it being a front-wheel drive Audi, turbo diesel, and so much torque does tend to eat up the front tyres. But these cooler, damper conditions playing into the hands really of the RF Motorsport team, and allowing that car to run at pace, maybe not quite as quick as Jason McAnulty's Lotus, but overall running at a good pace and having the flexibility to then make its pit stops as in when it chooses, rather than some of the less frugal cars, less economical cars, which need to space their pit stops out in order to get the maximum out of each tank full of fuel. Another battle on the track which might be interesting to look at is the battle between the two white Mazda MX-5s. Will Blackwell-Chambers there being caught and threatening to be passed by Adam Zieber's Porsche Motorsport Mazda car number 2. There they are on the screen now, the 69 Mazda Clapham North MOT sponsorship on that, just coming out of the banking down into Church. Flat out right-hander in a Mazda, maybe a little bit of a lift with these damp conditions, but then having gone flat out through Church, down the back straight they go and up towards the braking area for Rocket. They've got to be on their toes as well, because there's another faster Class D car coming up to lap them. The Class C cars at a slight power to weight disadvantage, up to 180 brake horsepower per tonne for the Class C Mazdas, whereas the Lotuses, Caterhams and the E46 BMW all developing more like 250 brake horsepower per tonne in their cars.
Just seeing on the inset there on screen, the number 96 Jaffa Cake Racing Mazda MX-5 is in from 12th position, 5th in Class B, and that's got Danny Grist at the wheel coming in. So he'll hand over to one of his teammates very shortly. So it's like a scheduled stop for them.
Up to the end of the Tom Price Straight goes the car of Will Blackwell-Chambers, the Clapham North MOT Mazda, and as I say, the Adam Zieber car, which was closing on it, now has, he's dropped back because he's still close behind, but the two white Mazdas making their way through the traffic and coming up now to lap one of the older cars in the field, the 101 Mazda MX-5, the one without a roof. Arguable the aerodynamic concepts behind either running a Mazda with a roof or without a roof. Slightly more comfortable to drive with a roof, and there are also suggestions that it's more aerodynamically efficient if it does have a roof, whereas the airflow gets a little bit interrupted with the roof down, as we see on the 101 green Mazda. This car, the 101 car, as we said yesterday, having participated in every single race of remembrance of the, since we've had them, 10 years. The BMW from the Royal Navy there having another spin, not revelling in the damp conditions quite as much. That's the second moment that that car has had this morning, already having careered across the grass on the exit of Church early on. Car 116 currently in the hands of, pause while I look it up, Sebastian Unwin. I think.
Whilst looking there, just watching on the screen there, the Kermit the Fiesta went diving down the outside of about 4 or 5 cars at once. It went past, trying to get past the C1, the Auto Test TSW Mazda MX-5, and then one of the Track Scotland Minis. There's also one of the WRC developments Citroen C1s, but now it's powering its way past again. So a nice gaggle of cars battling their way down the School Straight. Was just looking very carefully to look at the Royal Navy BMW when it rejoined, just to see if there was anything like potentially damage or a wheel that was loose or something was happening. It was squirming around a bit. It had been off the road, so there's probably some muck and dirt still on its tyres to clean off in the next couple of corners, but it seems to be running as it should do.
Yeah, I think it's just being very enthusiastically driven, which
that
is
too.
What we like to see. Also, what we like to see is that Subaru BRZ there in glorious blue and Pro Drive gold style colours, although it's an amalgam of Subaru Pro Drive and Racer Remembrance styling on the car there. Team of 4 wheelchair users, the drivers of that car, number 555, with the driver lineup of Lionel O'Connor, who's just getting out of the car, Dominic Pearson, Michael Smith and Steve or Dusty Binns. That car, I'll say, being driven by 4 drivers who have one good leg amongst them, as they like to say. All of them, as I say, wheelchair users. 2 of them paralysed from the chest down, and all of them ex-servicemen as well. So we're just having a discussion there, describing what it's like. We were talking to Gary Franks yesterday, who's managing that team, and having to manage the minds of the drivers as well as much as the strategy of the car, giving these drivers, I'll say, an experience of a lifetime, but they've had that already, but certainly changing their lives for the better, having had their own life-changing incidents in the past. So really a great reflection on what the Mission Motorsport ethos is all about, and the car itself is a bit like that as well, because it was bought as an insurance write-off, sourced using parts largely obtained through eBay, who are providing some of the sponsorship for that car. And I say it's a testament to a lot of hard work by a lot of very dedicated people, as the new driver just folds himself into the car, specially adjusted to run on hand controls, hand throttle, hand brake. The car itself has an automatic transmission, and it is a proper Subaru. There was some suggestion or temptation to turn it into a Toyota GT86, which is not a difficult job, but the team saying no, it started life as a Subaru, we're going to keep it as a Subaru, and Subaru themselves showing an interest once they knew the project was happening, and getting behind the project as well. So a real great story, that, the Subaru BRZ.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to see such backing and such support for it to get these guys out, and to have these 4 wheelchair users be able to continue to enjoy their passion of motor racing, to get them out on track and everything. One thing I have noticed, which is quite novel, is that whether they've done it purposely or coincidentally, but their wheelchairs are the same colour as the car. So the kind of the metal of the wheelchairs is the same blue as the Subaru, which I think is actually quite a nice kind of team touch, whether they did that purposely or not. I'd like to think they did.
I'm sure it was. As I say, having spoken to a couple of members of the team over the course of the weekend, it's there's been an attention to detail of the very highest standard with that the whole approach.
Wouldn't surprise me, given that you've got military personnel that you're dealing with, or ex-service leavers, giving precision and accuracy to everything they want to do. And again, it's really nice to see that car, as Paul rightfully said, in the proper Subaru factory motorsport colours, the blue and yellow with the proper gold wheels as well. Certainly a car that's, I think, all be proud of. And I didn't even twig the number on the side of the car either until yesterday properly, but 555 on that car as well, which is quite fitting given the history of Subaru and where it's been. So 555 is about to be pushed backwards.
Yeah, a bit slow on the uptake there, Scott. That's unlike you.
It is unlike me, to be fair. I think it pointed out on Friday evening, and I looked and went, oh yeah, it's 555. So I do like the colour coding, particularly the little BRSGC logo in the fluorescent yellow with everything else. It's colour coded nicely. But away it goes then with its new incumbent. So out it goes on to track once more. That car, for the record, is currently sat at the moment in 42nd place. And it now has at the wheel of it 555. Michael Smith has taken over, so he's going to take over his stint for the next 40 minutes or so until we throw the red and white checkered flag to suspend the race once again and end part 2.
An important feature of the end of part 2, Scott, is that you're not allowed to refuel in the final 15 minutes of part 2. I think that's been implemented as a safety regulation, knowing that a lot of people are making their way down into the pit garage area in preparation for the Remembrance service, and so even though the race itself will be suspended at 10:30, they will stop refueling at 10:15, and so any pit stops made in the last 15 minutes before the Remembrance service will be not refueling stops. I wanted to talk about Class B very briefly because there's quite a good battle going on there between 155, the Track Scotland car, which has been running with Lowell's Forsyth behind the wheel of it. He's in 7th place overall, but he's less than half a minute on aggregate ahead of Sebastian Fischer with the number 24 auto test Mazda MX-5. So the Mini Cooper against the Mazda in Class B, separated by just under half a minute. Third in Class B is still Brian Chandler's auto test Mazda, the number 14 car, but having had those 2 stop-and-go penalties, he is now 2 laps away from the battle for class lead in Class B. So it's reduced that from being a three-car class battle to only a 2-car class battle. However, important to remember, I keep banging on about pit stops, none of those cars in Class B, neither 155, 24 or 14, have yet completed their 4th pit stop. So they're all running at the moment on just 3 pit stops completed.
So just seeing here, actually, this Class B battle, on track at least, it's nose to tail. We have to remember, of course, this is aggregate timings. When they come across the line, they are still separated by 28.3 seconds at the line, because, of course, it's not a case of the gaps being reset, like with any race that gets paused or stopped and restarted again. Everything runs on aggregate. So, for example, the leaders, of course, still retain their 2-lap lead overall, the Audi over the Leos Racing Caterham. And for these guys in particular, yes, they might be nose to tail, but they're still, in order to actually take the lead of the race, the Sebastian Fischer is going to have to pass Lowell Forsyth and then extend the lead by at least 28.35, well, basically 29 seconds.
It's 27.7 seconds. So the gap at the end of part 1 between the two of them was 27.7 seconds. So that's the advantage that Sebastian Fischer is going to have to pull out ahead of Lowell Forsyth in order to take the lead of the race on aggregate. And then it gets more complicated in part 3 because we add 2 parts of the race together to make the 3rd part. But stick with us. We'll try and keep you up to date with what's happening. And as I say, as far as those cars running in Class B is concerned, it's just as important for them to finish top of their class as it is for the overall winners who are trying to win the race outright. And at the moment, that's still being achieved by the RAF Motorsport's sustainably powered Audi TT, which Alex Smith has not necessarily been driving the quickest on the track this morning, but he's been able to maintain that lead of 2 laps, although he has had a lap of his advantage to the 3rd place car of Jason McAnulty reduced, because Jason McAnulty has not only gone fastest but continued to lap very rapidly indeed. Again, a 141.882 last time around for Jason McAnulty in the 117 Lotus, quicker than anyone else has gone in this morning's segment of the race.
A couple of our BMW 116s calling to the pits. We've got one of the Yggdrasil cars, the BMW Art Machine. Oh, and we've got a car off the road. That's car 19 off the road. Yeah,
the Mazda MX-5 there from the Mission Motorsport entry, wandering all over the grass at the exit of Church, but I say it's remarkable the way the cars have been able to get back on the track again after those grassy moments. You'll remember, Scott, when we've had very wet years here
last year.
Anglesey last year, when you get a car off on the grass and it would immediately just disappear in a ball of spray and get bogged down in the mud and not get going again. But the groundwater level, it's fairly damp this morning, but the groundwater level not nearly as severe this year as has been in some of the previous years.
No, thankfully. And of course, when you get onto wet grass, particularly if you're going at speed, rather than slowing you down on wet grass, you speed up. Yeah. So essentially, it's genuinely like skating across ice. You can't stop the car. So you can almost the brakes become almost futile. You're thinking, just please stop, and you're relying on the natural friction to actually bring you to a halt, and hope that you don't actually hit something. If you do, that you hit something soft so that it doesn't cause too much damage. Fingers crossed.
It's all you tend to hit are molehills or various other little bits of wildlife that may be hiding in the grass, which is always interesting. Another interesting battle building up on the circuit, but again not one that's reflected on the timing screen. Steve McCulley in the second place Leos Racing Caterham is closing in on Alex Smith's Audi TT, and is not going to be very long before he catches that Audi TT, so that'll bring the lead gap down to 1 lap, although it'll be 1 lap and a lot rather than the 2 laps that's currently being shown on the screen. So Steve McCulley then, one of the original beneficiaries of Mission Motorsport's Race of Remembrance, having been involved not as a beneficiary now, but originally got racing through Mission Motorsport's efforts, and now a long-time competitor in his own right, worked his way up through the Caterham Academy, and having got to the top of the Caterham Academy now, running his own car, 2-driver effort with himself and Don Henschel. They're just coming into the bus stop now, nose to tail then, the race-leading Audi TT. The Audi TT you generally think of as being a fairly small car when you see it on the road, but with a Caterham up its rear wheels, as it is at the moment, the Audi suddenly looks a bit bulky, a little bit overweight almost, one might be tempted to say, but up to the banking they go. Back down again, and it is the Audi still in front. And the Caterham actually dropped back a little bit at the banking there. Coming down into Church once again. Meanwhile, having a look at the screen, the number 52 BMW has got a loose light bar, but
yes.
It's not loose anymore.
No,
it's sitting on the track.
It ceased to exist on the 52 BMW now. It's now sitting in the middle of the road. I don't think that's going to warrant a safety car. I don't think too much. The point about the Audi is quite interesting because, of course, that is an ex-Volkswagen Racing Cup car, which was originally kind of bought and by Darkside Developments from I think it's the guys who look after Track Flight, if I'm correct, one of those two, who have run those cars before. And those cars now are in the hands of Darkside Developments, and what they decided to do with those cars to make them kind of a more interesting race car is actually convert it to a diesel engine. So of course, remember that car not only running on sustainable fuels but on sustainable diesel. And of course, the advantage of being a diesel car in an endurance race, diesel cars do much more mileage than petrol cars do, and so therefore you're harking back to the days of Le Mans when Audi first turned up in 2006 with an R10. Everyone laughed and thinking, look at them with a diesel engine, and then they smashed the competition and set a standard for everyone else. So it was it had that kind of diesel revolution a little bit after a few years, when kind of if you had diesel in any kind of motorsport, let's say bar F1, then you were possibly doing something right in terms of, it was prominently sports cars and touring cars that took off, but I can't remember it taking off anywhere else.
No, I think the problem is that it all depends on how you engineer the car, and very often engines are designed to run on petrol and then converted to diesel, and what Audi did was to start with a blank sheet of paper and say we're going to build a diesel engine, and that's how they then took it forward. Conditions having got a little bit worse, there are more cars circulating with their windscreen wipers on than those were before, and as the rain has intensified a little bit, so Steve McCulley's pace has just dropped away a little bit. In the last couple of laps, Alex Smith has actually increased the gap on the track between himself and Steve McCulley. So it is still a 2-lap margin, and for the moment at least Steve McCulley dropping away from the back of the Audi. He was closing up, now he's dropping away. Coming slowly into the pits is the Patron BMW, and has immediately behind it the Breakdancer Racing relay car. That's also coming into the pits.
It is rather slow, isn't it?
Relay car turns left and goes back to the tented area where all the Breakdancer caterers are stationed, but the Patron racing car rather slow into the pits, Stuart. Scott.
You're thinking Stuart Humphrey, aren't you?
Yes, quite, that's right.
Yeah, that was rather slow for that car, and they're not getting around it with that much urgency, whether they're just being a bit more relaxed because they're further back, or they are going to refuel it. And again, it's not, whether it is a regular pit stop, I'm not sure, but they're not rushing around it as if there's anything terribly wrong. Maybe the driver was just taking his time because he's a bit, well, I say a bit further back in the order. That car's 11th and 4th in Class D, so it's not exactly way down the order, which is interesting. The battle for Class C at the moment, still 2 laps, well, technically 3 laps now between the 69 and the 91 cars. And lap time wise at the moment, we've got that. Now, I thought of extra aerodynamics, and that's certainly one of the C1s taking it to the extreme. It's not the first time I've seen a race car like that before, but that's the 303 Citroen C1 with some rather inadvertent new rear downforce, which I don't think it was intending, but it might be beneficial in these conditions.
Yes, echoes of Mercedes at Le Mans in 1955, which had a little air brake that came up at the back of the car. He'll be aware of what's going on there, and I think he's, as they come back down the hill there, I think he's indicating he's going to come into the pits with that car to have that, do you call it a boot lid on a Citroen C1? It's more of a hatchback, isn't it? Anyway,
Yeah.
It's flapped open, he's putting it into the pits. The other echoes, which will have been before your time, Scott, is the old Fiat 500s, which used to run in the Mille Miglia back in the 50s with the engine cover raised, which was ostensibly for cooling, but somebody clever discovered they actually went a little bit quicker because they were generating downforce without realising it.
Yeah, the Abarths that had those. Definitely, it was before one time, but I definitely do know exactly which cars you mean.
Black and white pictures of it.
Not just that, I've seen other places, but colour pictures. I definitely know which cars you mean. Absolutely. Routine stop, I'm guessing for that's the Track Scotland. No, that's the
other one. That's the Fiona Kindness car, I think, in the pits, number 55.
Yeah. The shot we saw there wasn't even a Mini. It was a Mazda MX-5. It was the light blue one, number 11, I think it was in for pit lane. Yeah, Peaky Blinders is in for pit stop from 26th and 7th in Class B at the moment. But yes, one of the Track Scotland cars was in for the pit lane. It was the blue Mini, so it's the 55 car that was in. The 155 we saw in pink on track, at least battling for track position with its current main rival in the class. There is the next of the relay caterers to go off. The 54 BMW, I understand, has just gone off the road, which is why we're focusing on screen. Looks like up at the top near Peel. So that car has continued on with not too much drama. It's now got one of the WRC Developments C1s right behind it, and just had the class-leading C-Class Clapham North Mazda MX-5 just in front of it go past.
BMW 54 being the Metabubu Racing BMW, currently in the hands of Mark Eddles. And Metabubu Racing, another great supporter of the race of Remembrance. Haven't really had much chance to talk about Metabubu, but had a long conversation with them, I remember, at last year's race of Remembrance. Terrific enthusiasts and, as I say, great supporters of the race of Remembrance over the past few years. Not going back over the full history of the race, but they have been great supporters of the race of Remembrance, and providing driving experiences for ex-military personnel. As Scott says, that car currently 27th overall and 6th in the BMW 116 Trophy class. Talking of classes, Breakdancer back out on the circuit with the relay car. Alan Curtis going out in the number 77 car. This is a different car from the one that came into the pits. The Caterham number 77 running as a relay team. They've got 3 different Caterhams here this weekend, and they swap the car at every pit stop. Doesn't mean the pit stop's any shorter. They still have to spend 4 minutes in the pit, so they don't get an advantage that way. But it does mean if they want to, they can work on their car whilst the other car is out, should that become necessary, although Caterham's perhaps one of the cars more suited to endurance racing, former winners of the race Remembrance. But that pit stop has elevated Will Blackwell-Chambers in the 69 Clapham North MOT Mazda up into 4th place overall in the leading Class C car. But still waiting to see when they're going to make their final 3 pit stops. We've got under 25 minutes of this race to go, and they then have to make 2 more pit stops after that in the remaining 3.5 hours that we will have of the race after the Remembrance service. So somebody down in the Rob Boston garage there, working with Clapham North MOT and George Grant, will be trying to work out when those pit stops are going to have to happen and how they're going to maintain their advantage over the Stuart Humphrey team, which has 2 BRDC members slashed in the pit, scattered away in the pit, Alex Capadia and Martin Rich, waiting to take over. So both vastly experienced, driving prototypes, GT cars, and not necessarily experts at driving a Mazda. And to be fair to Stuart Humphrey, Stuart is actually the team leader and team owner and the quickest of them, 3 of them. So despite Alex Capadia and Martin Rich's experience, they're not necessarily as quick as Stuart Humphrey is.
That's just knowing the car inside out and knowing how to get the best of it.
Absolutely.
The best example I can give of that in maybe a BRC context is the Mazda MX-5 Super Cup, which of course is Mark III MX-5s. And that championship has had drivers who have come in and won championships at club level and been plenty fast. But it still takes any newcomers who are still relatively quick, regardless who it is, at least a season to click with the car and get towards the front. So it's these cars that you can be as quick as anything in a prototype that you might be used to, but in an unfamiliar car against some of the more regulars that will race them day in and day out, you know, some drivers will have to still build up their way of driving it and getting used to the driving style on that side of things.
Absolutely, many different possible examples of that.
Yeah.
We can go down to the pit lane though. Rob Lewis has another interview lined up for us, so down to you, Rob.
One of the emerging stories that came from the C1 class was both Silver Lake cars absolutely rocketing away in qualifying before having a few issues yesterday during the race. One of the issues was while Greg Rose was at the wheel at car 558. But Greg, you had a bit of a mishap as you were getting up onto the banking. Tell us about it.
I got up onto the banking, but when I got to get down, when the tow truck arrived, I fell down the banking and fell heavily on my shoulder and head, which then put me, I went to see the emergency people, and I may have done something to the collarbone, but the muscles are a bit inflamed at the moment.
Are you racing for the rest of today, or is that you out?
No, I can't reach the steering wheel, so that's me out for the day.
So that's you supervising. Alan Preble's just gone out in car 558. With these issues, it's set the cars back a bit, but 558's flying. At one point, you were, what, 7 seconds quicker than the rest of the field?
Yeah, we had George in the car this morning. He took over after my mishap last night, and so he started this morning, run for an hour. Alan's in the car now. We'll run to the service and then run after that. Get as long as we can, put George in the car for the end. We just got to keep pushing, see where we end up.
458 as well, the Gen 1 car, probably its last hurrah for the year before you go to a pair of Gen 2s for next year. That's been going great guns as well.
Yeah, it's been going really well this weekend. We put the same setup on both cars and it seems to really work well.
So what's the plan for this afternoon? Chest down them pesky WRC cars?
Yeah, try and get see where we can get with them. Yeah.
Right, we'll leave you to it before Chappers does too much more mooning in the background, Greg, but good luck for the rest of the race.
I didn't see any of that, so we're good. Thank you.
Fantastic. So everyone is just getting prepared down here with the last pit stops, because with the way the driver stints work, you can't just change drivers and then get back into the car to resume the race after the service. So the teams have got to use a bit of nous. So we've seen a lot of pit lane activity down here at the moment. One of the RAF Mazda MX-5s, car number 19, has come out after a bit of repair work. That's getting ready to go back out onto the service. But a busy pit lane here as well, and the stage is here ready to be set up for the Remembrance service that'll be coming along shortly. But for now, time to head back up into the commentary box to Paul and to Scott.
Yeah, just over 20 minutes of the race to go before the second suspension, which, as you were watching, if you were watching last night, is achieved with the use of a red and white checkered flag. The safety car comes out immediately before that to slow the field down, and then will complete one lap behind the safety car, and then the checkered flag, red and white checkered flag, will be shown to suspend the race. The cars will then be left for this session on the start-finish straight, and so the restart will be behind the safety car in exactly the same order as they finished the first part. As I say, no refueling is allowed in the last 15 minutes, which gives them just under 5 minutes still to make a refueling stop. So I think at this stage most of them will be staying out until the Remembrance service, and as Rob says, the driver who finishes the section of the race now will have to start the car afterwards. As far as the Citroën class is concerned, very much WRC Development's benefit at the moment, with their car number 586 leading the way at the moment, with Robin Welsh in the lead car, number 586, and then 386. Colin Gillespie is in second place. He's 2 laps adrift in second place, which is exactly the gap that they had at the end of part 1 last night. So WRC 586 leads WRC 386, 2 laps apart from one another. And then a further lap back in third place in the Citroën C1 class, despite all their histrionics and fun-making. James Matthews with the Scuderia Polo Rosso Citroën, car number 310, is next up in the Citroën C1 class. So that's the situation as far as their class is concerned. The BMW 116 Trophy class, yesterday very much a story of Anthony Seddon Racing. That situation has repeated itself today, with young Matt Priestwood in the 34 BMW leading the number 21 car of Alan Caulfield. Those two separated at the moment by just 1.6 seconds, so nothing to choose between the two Alan Caulfield BMWs. Yesterday it was the other way around, wasn't it? 21 finishing ahead of 34. So yeah. Matt Priestwood has overcome the disadvantage that he was at yesterday in that BMW trophy car, and has got himself now back to the head of the field. So a little bit of an inter-team battle there, intra-team battle between the two Anthony Seddon Racing cars.
Yeah, given the fact on the timing screen they're only separated by 1.6 seconds, this is the definition of an intra-team battle between the two of them, and both teams are just as quick as each other. We spoke to Sam Carrington-Yates. In fact, I think, yes, here they are. In fact, this is on track together, heading up towards, this is now Church Corner, just coming through, the two BMWs nose to tail. So this is essentially the battle for the BMW 1 Series class lead between the two teammates. They come out of Church Corner onto the back straight towards the Rocket Complex. They've got the race-leading Audi TT number 7 just powering past it. So that's the diesel Audi making its way through. Also carved its way past the Road and Tracks Citroën C1. But yeah, this is another battle that's been fascinating all the way through to watch this one, and it's mainly been between these two teammates, two cars. You've got, at the moment, the young Mackenzie Priestwood, who is... No, sorry, it is Mackenzie Priestwood. It's 34. Yes, Mackenzie Priestwood, showing that car with Lewis Tyndall and Toby Riley. And out the wheel currently for 21 is Alan Caulfield, who's showing that car with Harry Ormerod, Sam Carrington-Yates and George Healer. So some strong driving talent in both of those cars. And definitely, it's almost kind of hard to pick which one's going to be the favourite. And I think this will be a duel that will go all the way to the checkered flag. And it's not really going to be settled, I think, until we get to the final stages of the race when we get to part 3 later on.
Yeah, it's very much a case of who they've got in the car at the time. Matt Priestwood is clearly the quickest driver in the Anthony Seddon Racing team. And we've got a slow BMW going down the back straight. It's not going down the back straight. That's the 116 BMW again, I think.
And I think that's been off because there's debris on the edge of the circuit, I think.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time that car has been off, because had a moment at Church at the beginning of this session. He's got going again and is heading up towards the Rocket Complex, the Royal Navy Motorsport entry. Only one entry from the Royal Navy as opposed to the Air Force, who's come mob-handed to Anglesey this year. I think they've got 5 cars or 6 cars entered by RAF Motorsport over the course of the weekend in the Club Sport Trophy yesterday and in today's races. And of course they've also got the car that is leading the race overall with the Audi TT. Still 2 laps comfortably the margin, but 2 pit stops still to come from all of the leading 3 cars. 3 pit stops still to come from the 4th placed Clapham North car with Will Blackwell Chambers at the wheel. The breakdancer relay team have actually completed all their mandatory pit stops, but because they run a relay team, they're kind of doing more pit stops anyway. And then in 6th place overall is Stuart Humphrey in the 2nd of the Class C Masters. That car with still 2 pit stops due to it.
Just in a nervy moment, I think, for the class leading C1, the 586 WRC developments car with Robin Welsh at the wheel, the man who looks after the C1 Racing Club. Not quite covering himself in too much glory, running wide of Peel Corner, but he gets it back on the road unscathed in front of a rather bemused couple of cars around him. We are inside the final 15 minutes, which means that, as far as I understand it, no refuelling is allowed. So,
that's correct.
So ultimately, if you haven't made a fuel stop yet, tough. You're going to have to do it when the race gets back underway after the service, but keep going on that sense. There's the Patron Racing BMW. There's also the Rob Boston Racing Lotus still pounding round. Pace-wise, it's in the 149s. Peter Mansfield's current wheel of that car and tracking its way through. It's got the 155 Track Scotland Mini just going around the outside of it as it's being boxed in by the Lotus being boxed in by the Mini to its right, and right in front of it, it had the 303 Citroen C1 that came in that had the rear, well, window really, rather than boot lid. It's a one complete piece of glass rather than a metal and glass for the rear boot, I think. And with more stories from pit lane, let's head back down to Rob Lewis, see what he has.
Well, as you can see down here in pit lane, the rain has arrived. We were due a deluge around this time, just in time for the service. But we have the likes of car number 90 here, one of the BMW 116 cars. They've already changed onto wet tyres. And it breeds the question. The cars are stopping for the Remembrance service soon. They can't change tyres out there. They can't work on the cars. If you're on a semi-slick tyre, on a grippy track tyre, do you leave the car out there and take the risk, hoping the rain dies off? Or do you come in, get a wetter, grippier tyre on there, do the service, and then resume once we know the rain could possibly get heavier? But as from our view, the Irish Sea has disappeared, so the rain and the weather front has come in, and it is pouring with rain down there. We're expecting to see the spray coming from the cars within the next 2 minutes, so the weather is now being an absolute game changer here for the rest of this race. Back to you.
Certainly was last year when we had a rain from the start of the day. So hopefully it doesn't come down too much, because we'd like it to be not too wet for the Remembrance service. I remember last year when it was wet from the start, and then quite conveniently the rain stopped and eased off for the service, then started again afterwards. This
is my 7th race of Remembrance, and every single year the rain has stopped during the race of the Remembrance service. Not saying anything, just that's what happens. I know James Cameron has friends in high places, but whether they're quite that high up, I don't know. I know he meets with politicians regularly, but it is Sunday after all, and a very special Sunday amongst the military community, which we will be celebrating here in Anglesey within the next 15 minutes or so. The race, as Scott says, 11 minutes and a half still to go. Windscreen wipers now on pretty much all of the cars, although somebody needs to tell Alpha Live to wipe their camera.
It's a static camera that's gone out of focus, so it's focusing more on the raindrops that are on the lens than it is on the circuit. That's how wet it is. Here's a car which I think probably should be revelling in these conditions, the little Fiat Panda. That's one of the most popular cars. Spoke to Dean Lomas this morning, said, yeah, apart from its alternator problems last night, all good, everything. They're actually going to fill this car up pretty much to the brim, so much so that it was almost coming out of the top of the insert part when you refuel it, and simply they were going to go through the entire stint without needing to make a fuel stop, which should be quite doable given the small Fiat Panda's got a small and rather frugal engine, so that car should be all good.
Indeed, given that these are all based on road cars, you would expect that they can do an hour and a half, which is the period of this particular segment of the race. You wouldn't expect to be stopping your road car every hour and a half to go into a petrol station. I know some people are fairly aggressive with their use of the throttle, but
depends on the car.
Well, yes, quite. Yeah, most cars these days are fairly fuel efficient, so I don't think we've had any, or if we have, they've been further down the field. Certainly amongst the leading 10, 15 cars, we haven't had any refueling pit stops in this segment of the race, despite the single safety car period that we had. But as I say, with the rain intensifying at the moment, the pace will drop off and allow cars to achieve better economy in any case. So Alex Smith then at the wheel since the beginning, and indeed was driving the car last night as well, up to 10 o'clock at night, has been in the car since 9 o'clock this morning, has established or kept the 2-lap advantage that he's had over Stephen McCulley in the Caterham. In second place, Jason McAnulty has managed to get himself past the Audi TT in his Lotus Elise, and has been lapping pretty quickly, faster than anybody else in this particular segment. And indeed, if you would treat this segment as a race in its own right, then Jason McAnulty would be 35 seconds ahead, because that is the distance on the road between Jason McAnulty in the Lotus Elise and the Audi TT in second place, or in the lead. So, but in terms of today's race, Alexander Smith is 35 seconds now behind Jason McAnulty. So the Able Care ES Motorsport Lotus Elise, the class of this morning, but lost time during yesterday's race, and so still has a 2-lap disadvantage to make up. They've completed 43 laps in this morning's segment in the hour and 22 minutes that we've had of today's race. At least the leaders are on their 44th lap now. Just waiting for Steve McCulley to come through in the number 97 Leos Racing Caterham. He'll be the next one through of the leading group.
Just quickly come out, have a look out the window looking where the corkscrew, and just saw a sideways NJ4 Fiesta down through the corkscrew. Kept it going, but it was full on the 45 degrees going down the hill, which was quite an amusing sight. I was going to mention also, again, we talked about the fact that the Mazdas are working pretty well. This has been one of those races where the Mazdas pretty much have kept themselves out of trouble, and we've got 4 Mazda MX-5s in the top 10, particularly the fact at the moment, considering the demise of the issues for the 27 BMW that's forced it down the order and forced it to be repaired and back to the garage, that the Class C leading Clapham North car has now risen to the dizzying heights of 4th overall, which is quite an impressive run for them at the moment. I don't think they're going to have, unless, again, touch wood, any of the top 3 cars have any issues, and the Mazda itself continues on without any troubles. I don't think it will get into the podium places, but it will stay there. And of course, we have to take into account it still has pit stops to make, so it will lose a bit of time once it starts making those mandatory pit stops that it needs to do. The other MX-5s in the order, you've got the 6th position of Stuart Humphrey Racing, with Stuart at the wheel of it in car 91. That's the rival team for Class C. And then you have this battle going on for Class B, which involves the 2 auto test run Mazda MX-5 Mark 1s, the 7th place car, which is Sebastian Fisher at the wheel. He's sharing that car with Michael Green and Oliver Graham, who are regulars. Well, Oliver and Michael have been regulars in the MX-5 Championship. Seb's been taking a bit of a break recently, but he's joined his teammates again for this race. And then you have the Lancaster Insurance Auto Test car, which I think is a bit of a partnership between, for this car, Auto Test and BC Cars Motorsport. And that car, of course, being shared by Peter McNichol, Rob Walker, and are now 2-time vice champion in the Gazshocks Mazda MX-5 Championship, being Adam Sparrow. So that car running well in 9th position. They're still battling away with the 2 Track Scotland Minis. Then just on the verge of the top 10 is another MX-5, and that's the first of the Paul Sheard cars. It's number 2, which has Adam Ziebra at the wheel, and that's been shared by 2 more co-drivers that have Mazda MX-5 experience at BRSCC level, and that's Alec Livesley and Nick Dougal. So that car certainly running well. Nick Dougal, when he races for BRSCC, usually does do Club Sport Trophy, one of the nippy little Mazda 2s, but back into a Mazda MX-5, and I've seen it before. He's been in the Mark 1, so good to see that these guys are doing well. So it seems as though that we do have quite a strong Mazda contingent of Mazda Mark 1s and Mark 3s with a couple of Mark 2s as the bagpipers get ready.
Yeah, the advantage of the Mazdas being reflected in the battle for Class B honours now as well, because Seb Fisher has taken the lead of Class B with the Auto Test TSW Mazda of Seb Fisher. Just looking for what's happened to the Track Scotland car, because that slipped back to, I think it's maybe, this is an effect of the 2-part race adding together. So Craig Dillon, now at the wheel of the 155 car, has just completed a proper pit stop, hasn't he? That's what's happened. So yes. 155 has completed a full pit stop, and that has seen a change of driver from Loyals Forsyth to Craig Dillon. So that now puts that car on 4 pit stops completed, whereas the rest of the Class B runners have still only completed their 3 pit stops.
So that battle's certainly going to carry on into the third part of the race. I noticed on 1 or 2 of the LED light displays that a couple of them are flickering, and one of which is the 155 car, which doesn't have a full array now of LED lights on the side, but it is now continuing with identification. Not that you need it too much in these, daylight, but still murky conditions. It's just gone past the second placed BMW, so the 2 Anthony Seddon cars still hold position. There's Alan Caulfield at the wheel.
Worth giving credit to Track Scotland, because they've had to work extremely hard over the course of the weekend, having had to do some engine changes on Friday and had one car sitting out the whole of the qualifying sessions whilst the engine was expecting new parts and they were waiting for those to arrive. And so Track Scotland, having worked as hard as they have done, being rewarded with so far a very good, reliable and successful race. Now the safety car is out, yellow flags are being displayed around the circuit, so no overtaking. Whether that message quite reached the rocket complex as the Operation Motorsport Canada car got there, I'm not sure, because it was embroiled in a bit of a battle with the BRZ, and they managed to sort themselves out just as the yellow flag has come out. So yellow flag has come out around the circuit. The safety car, the Bentley, is waiting at the exit of the pit lane to come out and take up its position at the head of the field, which will be in front of the Audi of Alex Smith, which has just gone across the start-finish line. So the Bentley takes its cue, heads out of the pit lane, heads up towards the hairpin right of the banking, and as Alex Smith reaches the same place, so the Audi TT puts on the brakes, slows his pace, and we'll now have 1 lap behind the safety car. Marshall's down on the start-finish line, ready with the red and white checkered flag, and so all of the effort of the last hour and a half, I hate to say this, but it's all been wasted in a sense, because the
well, it depends on the gaps, doesn't it? In terms of if people are close and change positions, so it might have been profitable, it might have been possibly time lost. Yeah,
but in the case of Jason McAnulty, who, as I say, had established a lead over Alex Smith of some 30 seconds before the safety car was deployed, all of a sudden he finds himself going around. Well, it does get him back onto the lead lap, doesn't it? So from Jason McAnulty's point of view, it now puts him only 2 laps behind the race leader and on the same lap as Steve McCulley.
Yes.
So from that point of view, that has helped. There he goes across the line now, actually, is Jason McAnulty. So he's quite a long way back in terms of where he is in the safety car queue. but nevertheless he has made up one of the 3 laps that he was away from the RAF Audi TT, which has run faultlessly so far, he says, giving him the commentator's curse straight away. But despite the issues which were being described to me before the race for that Audi TT, with its propensity to use up front tyres, so far the car has been able to run on its front tyres, and that's probably been helped certainly this morning by the weather conditions, and with its fuel consumption as much in its favour as it is, then if these conditions continue to prevail for the rest of the day, I'm just wondering what's going to beat that Audi apart from a mechanical glitch. But anyway, we'll see what happens. That's why we like this sport so much, because it's always unpredictable. Safety car brings the field slowly down through the corkscrew while the rest of the field catch up. On the screen there, going into the rocket complex, the right and left-hander. Oh, Jason McAnulty coming grinding to a halt altogether there in the 117 purple Lotus Elise. Right at the back of that lineup there is the Jaguar XF, the pop bang colour liveried car, and still got its rotating identification lights on the front of that car where the fog lights ought to be. They've put those ID lights on as the safety car train is so long. You've got cars going up towards Rocket and others coming through Peel, such as the reliability shown by all of the field. I don't think we had 55 cars start eventually this part, and we still have 55 cars running, so a race of remembrance to remember without any retirements potentially in prospect. Again, predicting what might happen with 3.5 hours of the race still to go. The red and white checkered flag held out by a rather damp start-finish marshal, but crossing the line then is the number 7 Audi TT. Second in the row behind there is the Stuart Humphrey Mazda, and that won't have helped it, because that will have given the Will Blackwell Chambers Mazda, Clapham North Mazda 69, another lap of an advantage, which despite that Mazda, the Clapham North Mazda, having to make another pit stop, that will help the Clapham North team. So from a strategic point of view, fascinating the way that this race pans out. You need to, I think Rob Lewis used the expression, use your nonce a little bit to get the best out of the way that the regulations work, and in the end nobody really minds who wins and who loses, because that is the nature of this race. But in the end, you get a racing driver, you get a racing car. It's a competitive sport. You want to do as best you can, and for the leading class drivers, that means trying to make the best of any particular situation as it gets presented to you. So we will now be lining up the cars on the start-finish line and then building up to the Remembrance service. We'll go and get racing underway again at around about 11:30. But if you're watching on the stream, don't tune away, because the whole point of the race of Remembrance is to have this Remembrance service. And as James Cameron was saying on air last night, any other circuit, provided they would conform to the conditions of the silence at the appropriate time of 11 o'clock on the Remembrance Sunday. Good to do that, and a great way to commemorate the military personnel who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. So just to recap, Alexander Smith leading the way in the number 7 RAF Motorsport, sustainably powered by the RAF Central Fund, leading the way, 264 laps completed, 2 laps ahead of the Leos Racing Caterham Steve McCulley in number 97 in second place. In third place, Jason McInulty in the AbleCare ES Motorsport Lotus Elise, number 117. In third place, also on 262 laps. And then on 255 laps, further 7 laps behind, is the leading Class C car, which is Will Blackwell Chambers in the Clapham North MOT Mazda MX-5 car, number 69. Fourth overall. In fifth place overall is number 77, the Breakdancer Racing Relay Team, which has Alan Curtis currently representing their team in his version of number 77, which is car F in the 6-driver lineup. That's fifth. In sixth place is the second place Class C car, number 91, Stuart Humphrey in his team Mazda, and he has completed 252 laps compared to 255 for the Clapham North team's car. Seventh is the leading Class B class car, Seb Fisher in the Auto Test TSW Mazda MX-5 car number 24, which has completed 250 laps, 2 more than the Track Scotland 2 Mini Cooper of Craig Dillon, car 155, but that car, the Track Scotland 2 car, has completed 1 extra pit stop compared to the Seb Fisher car, so a similar situation to what we have in Class C, in that the car that leads owes us a pit stop, and the car behind in second place has that pit stop in hand. Third in Class B is Brian Chandler in the car that had to make 2 stop-and-go penalties in this morning's